Today's shoutouts go to Ward Vanash, V Lofty, and Beluga King. If you want to get featured in my next video, then just comment something down below. If I like it, then I will be sure to put you at the beginning of next week's video. Now are my predictions to what I can see coming to SeaWorld Orlando following 2020. Enjoy. A lot of people rolled their eyes over the announcement of Tigris and debated whether or not it would be a better fit at SeaWorld Orlando. Personally, I do believe it would have been a better fit at SeaWorld, but ultimately I am glad they did not get the third Skyrocket 2 because in 2020 we get Icebreaker. I have no doubt in my mind Icebreaker will be better than a Skyrocket 2 and is bound to be a great fit for the park, but for today we are going to be looking past Icebreaker and make some predictions of future expansion. We are going to take in as much information as we can, such as analyzing the lineup, looking for gaps in the lineup, possible ride placement, manufacturers they have worked with recently, and narrow it down to our top 5 predictions to what I can see coming to SeaWorld Orlando following 2020. Of course, in the end, I will be sharing my official forecast to what I genuinely believe the next ride will be. Now, before we begin, I want to talk briefly about SeaWorld's business model because it is much different than other parks. Unlike other parks and even other SeaWorld parks, Orlando focuses on quality, not quantity, and that's mostly because of the space they're given. If you look at the park using Google Earth, then you can see that it is very crowded and congested with little room for expansion. The idea is if they want to add something, then they would need to remove something to make space. Other parks you go to, like for example Six Flags, you're going to get much more quantity of rides, but not necessarily quality. I feel like Herchend parks, Cedar Fair, and Busch Gardens parks have an excellent blend of both quality and quantity, but that's not the case for SeaWorld Orlando. A major factor to how I make my prediction videos is I look at the space the park has for expansion and I use that as a reference to what size ride they might add in the future. Now, because SeaWorld Orlando is so compact and congested with so much stuff, it's very hard to predict. So specifically for this video, we are looking at what the best fits for SeaWorld are for growing them as a business. Anyway, let's start by breaking down SeaWorld's current lineup. Including Icebreaker, the park will only have 6 coasters, but that's okay because as I said, they are all quality attractions, with their top 3 being all B&Ms. For the B&Ms, there's a Floorless, Flyer, and Hyper. There is also a mock water coaster, Journey to Atlantis. There is a Zaire family coaster, and as of 2020, a Premier Rides multi-launch coaster. For the number of rides the park has, they have a vast collection. Fundamentally, I believe that every park should have a coaster over 200 feet, a kiddie coaster, launch coaster, wood coaster, 2 unique coasters, and a ride that mostly emphasizes on inversions. SeaWorld nails all of these except for the wood coaster, so maybe a wood coaster is an option. Now let's talk about gaps in the lineup, and first is that wood coaster. Next is another unique coaster. SeaWorld already has Manta, which is a solid unique coaster, and they also have Kraken, but I think Kraken falls more into the ride that emphasizes on inversions rather than a unique coaster, so I think it's time to expand with another unique coaster. The park could also use a second launch coaster that instead of focusing on the whole family, it's more of a thrill coaster with inversions. And the final gap is a coaster with a vertical or beyond vertical drop. Next, let's look around the park for some locations where these rides can go. As I said before, if SeaWorld wants to add something, they're going to need to start removing things. So all these locations are based off of coordination with other rides. I am not the park, so I am not sure what buildings they plan on keeping or removing, so just take these locations with a grain of salt. Anyway, our first location is right beside the spot where Icebreaker will be going. It would go right where you see those buildings and stretch more towards the parking lot. I think this is a good spot because people can see it from the parking lot and get excited. Next is very cramped, but maybe the land between Manta's drop and this stadium. The stadium does stand at the top of the hill and the ground does slope down, but it would be a nice location nonetheless. Next is least likely, but the land where the Arctic section is the same spot that has Empire of the Penguins. I think this is prime land for a new Arctic themed coaster. I know Empire of the Penguins was a letdown to many people, so a ride replacement is an option. Next is actually the land beside Empire of the Penguins where you see that small exhibit, and would also have the land that runs aside Kraken. To me, this land just screams RMC Raptor, but I'll get into that in a minute. Lastly is the land between Mako and Infinity Falls, right where this significant building is. Again, this is prime land for a ride that can fit in. It's in a beautiful location and on completely flat ground. Those were all locations that I could see rides coming to, and now are the rides that I see happening. Before I say what they are, I do want to make myself clear that these are all smaller models. As you can see from the locations I showed you, the park is landlocked and in need of smaller rides. I put all the information together like the gaps, space, manufacturers, and filed it down to my top 5 predictions, and these are in no specific order. All the rides are not necessarily what I would want to see come, but what I think are useful additions to grow SeaWorld as a business. So first, let's talk about that RMC Raptor. An RMC Raptor is perfect. It's small and compact, gives inversions and airtime, which is a ride the park doesn't have. It's steep, fast, and cheap, and above all, this is the ride that I would want to see come first. It would go in that area that I teased earlier, and we know SeaWorld is now working with RMC for Iron Gwazi, and it would just be a perfect fit for the park. Next might come as a surprise to people, and trust me, I would probably be pretty surprised myself, but I can see an S&S launch coaster much like Max Force. I think Max Force is a great ride to compare this to because it has a very compact layout. It would have a wicked fast acceleration, so it would be a step up from Icebreaker, and I can see it going in that land between Manta and the stadium for an out and back layout. The only issue is SeaWorld hasn't worked with S&S lately, so I also considered an Intamin Blitz, but I settled with S&S because an Intamin Blitz is most likely too big and Busch Gardens has one for themselves. And if you do think that they will get an Intamin instead of an S&S, I totally understand that, so in an alternative option I could see a Terran clone. Next is that Wood Coaster. It's a Gravity Group family coaster. Again, this is perfect because it would fill the Wood Coaster gap and not take up a lot of space. For a location, that spot near Icebreaker because that's near Sesame Street, which is their kids area. In 2018, SeaWorld worked with Gravity Group for Oscar's Wacky Taxi, and a ride along those lines would be fantastic. For my final 2 predictions, I'm going to be talking about this same spot of land. It's that land between Mako and Infinity Falls. Both these models I could see fitting into this land because it is mostly on flat ground, but first is going to be a ride that's totally unique to America. This is a Vekoma Bermuda Blitz, much like Let Coaster in Poland. It would have a very compact layout with inversions. It is entirely different from any other coaster in the area and would draw crowds. Now, we do have the same issue here as we did with S&S, and that is SeaWorld and Vekoma have not worked together recently, so they would need to make new connections to build this ride. The last ride before my official prediction would go in that same spot of land, and it would fill that beyond vertical drop. This is a Gerstlauer dive coaster, think Hang Time. Again, it's a new manufacturer to SeaWorld, but it would give a steep drop, vertical lift, inversions, and would provide good contrast with SheiKra. I say this because Hang Time has a very slim profile, and the land that you're looking at now really fits that. It's very thin and long. Next is my official prediction to what I genuinely think the next SeaWorld roller coaster will be. It is a B&M wing coaster to replace Empire of the Penguins. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. It's a unique coaster that's been thrown around in the past. I think white track would be great to fit the color of snow and maybe gray supports, and of course it would have a wing over drop. Alternatively, if the park wants to get real creative, they can make a launched wing coaster. I'm not saying a launched wing just because. I think there are actual legitimate benefits to it being a launched wing, such as it would save space that the lift would take up, it gives a thrilling launch coaster that's a step up from Icebreaker, and it would save the park from needing to add another launch coaster down the road. So that's going to wrap up my thoughts over what I can see coming to SeaWorld Orlando, but as always, I like to throw in some bonus coasters, and today I have 2. First is a GCI Woody that would take the place over the Gravity Group coaster, think something like Invader. Second is a B&M Invert. I would love to see an invert come to the park, but Busch Gardens has one for themselves, so maybe not, but I think it is still a great option. Hey guys, thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed and want to see more just like it, click this playlist right here. If you want to subscribe to my channel, click my little logo right beneath me. I am your host Zach from Theme Park Media signing off, and I will catch you in the next one.